Welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar, ALM.NET and ALM Octane Demystified. My name is Brent Jenkins, Marketing Manager here at Checkpoint Technologies, and I will be your moderator. Joining me today is our presenter, Dean Carvin, Director of Professional Services here. Dean, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself before we get started?
Sure, Brent, thank you. Join Brent and thank you for joining our webinar. My name is Dean Carvin. I'm the Director of Professional Services for Checkpoint Technologies. I've been in the QA world for about 16 years now, going on 17 years. Started back in the days of Mercury Interactive and worked with Quality Center, ALM, and kind of my passion is test automation as well. And I'm glad to be leading this presentation today.
Great, thanks, Dean. A little bit about Checkpoint Technologies before we start. We started in January in 2003. That's when we incorporated, and our headquarters is located in sunny Tampa, Florida. Our area of expertise is all around the quality assurance and quality control areas, specifically when it comes to functional, performance, and application security testing. We are a Hewlett-Packard Enterprise Gold Partner, authorized software support partner, and an HPE certified training partner. We are also proud to be partners with Zephyr, Mobile Labs, and Turnkey Solutions, who all make leading-edge solutions to address software testing challenges. Along with that, we are also affiliated with QAI Worldwide. QAI stands for Quality Assurance Institute, and if you ever need training courses on things like the essentials in software testing or mobile application testing, we can certainly provide that to you right here in our Tampa Training Center. As far as some of the professional services we provide to companies all around the United States, there's staff augmentation. So if you need some strong testing resources to be part of your team, long or short term, whether on-site or remote, we can provide that to you. We also provide consulting, such as handling upgrades, installation configuration, and customization for different solutions. Next is our version of offshoring, where we can house a team for you right here in our 7,800 square foot headquarters in Tampa. We also provide education, structured classroom training, or tailored mentoring, which is where we will go on-site in your environment and educate your team how to use a solution where real work gets done. A little bit of housekeeping before we start. This is a live webinar, but it is being recorded. So everyone that has registered today will receive a link within about 24 hours of that recording for you to watch at any point in time that you'd like. We will be doing a Q&A session at the end of this webinar. So be sure to ask questions anytime. We'll probably interject here and there with some questions along the way, but we will have a Q&A session at the end. To ask those questions, you should see your control panel here through GoToWebinar, which is what we're using. And there is a question section. Just type your question in and hit send, and we'll get it, and we'll get to it if we can. If we don't have time to get to your questions, we will follow up in about a week or so with the answers to all those questions to everybody who's registered. I wanted to remind everyone here the key takeaways you should get from this webinar, which are what are the major differences between ALM.NET and ALM Octane, how ALM Octane supports Agile, Lean, and/or DevOps methodologies, and how ALM Octane provides native integration for third-party DevOps tools. So before I pass the presentation off to Dean and let him clear up those differences, I thought it'd be a good idea to take a poll and to see how everyone currently knows the differences between the two. So the question is, how well do you currently know the difference between ALM.NET and ALM Octane? Is it no clue? That's why I'm here. Vaguely, the basics, and very well. Why the heck am I here? So if you could just go ahead and take that poll for us, we'd greatly appreciate it. We're going to let everybody have a few moments to take it. All right, it looks like just about everyone's taken the poll. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. Thank you, everybody. So it looks like, thankfully, that most people have no clue, about 50% of you. And then there's 32% that vaguely know the difference, 16% that know the basics, and 3% of people that are wondering right now, why are they here? So, Dean, I'm going to hand it off to you to talk about your thoughts on the results of the poll and to kick off the presentation. So go ahead and take it away, Dean.
Thanks, Brent. Appreciate it, man. So it looks like either 3% can take a nap during this time, or I can give them the presentation. They can present it. So, but that's great. I'm glad you joined us anyway. Hopefully, the other 97% will get a better understanding of how ALM Octane is different from ALM.NET. There are certainly some similarities, but we'll certainly see some major differences between the two tools. So I appreciate you participating in that poll. That is very helpful. So let's move on to the presentation. So we all want to actually move, most organizations I should say, want to move towards a more agile DevOps methodology. And the point being, the purpose of that is, in this graph, if I can just explain it, there's 3 columns: improvement in time to market, reduction in cycle time, improvement in productivity. That should be the goal of any organization developing software, any kind of product for that matter. And what this shows is a report that actually, using a baseline of 100 for a waterfall type methodology, moving to DevOps, that number becomes, when it comes to improvement to market, it goes down to 17. In other words, it's a much greater improvement, time to market, or less time to market, I should say. Cycle time is reduced by 10-fold in a DevOps environment compared to a waterfall environment. And the improvement in productivity is about twice the improvement in productivity. Okay, so every organization should strive to see these kinds of numbers. So what HPE has done is develop a tool, a test management tool called ALM Octane that supports better the DevOps and Agile types of methodologies. So let's take a look at some of the history. And I want to tie, the reason we want to look at the history, we want to look at the history of ALM back in the day when it was test director, and the purpose for which each was built. Okay, so I'm kind of a history buff. I enjoy looking at random types of history. So waterfall is really interesting. So it was first formally documented in 1970, but actually it was first used in the mid-50s for software development. Okay, so it's been around for quite some time, probably longer than most of us on this webinar, I would hope. So it's been the standard for decades at most organizations. In fact, the Department of Defense documented the standard for their use in 1985, and it remains the standard even to today for the DoD when working with software development contractors. So if you've ever worked on a defense contract or any other organization working with a defense department, it's most likely waterfall. So it's a little slow if you're used to Agile and you move to that. It could be a little painful. So as far as definition, waterfall is a sequential process. It's managed by gates. One part can't move on, or one section, the conception initiation, can't move on to, say, analysis until that initiation is done. Design can't move on until analysis is completed, signed off on. That gate's closed, move on to design. All right, it's very incremental and very structured. A lot of documentation, things like that. So as far as test management support, back in 1995, Mercury Interactive, if you've been around for a while in this industry, you're familiar with Mercury Interactive, that later became Mercury, but they developed Test Director back in 1995. I started working with it in, I believe it was 99. It was still a client-server-based application. And then they released, I believe in 2000 or 2001, around there, a version 7.i, the I being Internet. All right, so then it became a browser-based application. A little more easier to work with. But even before that, the client-server, part of the, another tidbit here, but part of the certification process for Test Director was actually being able to install a client-server, that fat client-server application. Physically do that, and you're tested on being able to install it. It was kind of that painful. So Test Director became Quality Center back in 2004. And the purpose of that terminology change, that name change, was to really focus on the fact that Test Director, even before it was renamed, was really focused more on the quality of a product, not just the testing effort of that product. So Quality Center simply just simply stated that it's the whole quality from requirements to test management, test execution, defect tracking, from end to end. So in 2006, HP bought Mercury and continued to build on the Quality Center platform. So we're all familiar with this image. There's numerous ones, but this simply just shows the linear process of Waterfall, moving from one step to the other. So let's take a look at Agile. So Agile Manifesto was published in 2001, but actually before that, the process was used in DSDM, in Scrum, in Extreme Programming in 1997 when that came about. But those processes were all then put under the heading of Agile after the Agile Manifesto was published in 2001. So they were all really developed, in and of themselves, but Agile kind of encompassed the whole process under one heading. And it's simply just a quicker, easier, more iterative way of developing software. So the understanding is software is very flexible, very unpredictable. So even though you may have a nice set of requirements, when you go to develop those requirements, sometimes they just don't make sense. And then Waterfall methodology, going back and modifying requirements is quite a process. In an agile environment, it's more cyclical, more iterative, more flexible, less documentation. It's much easier than to go back and modify a requirement or a story in this case, and then develop based on that change. Okay, so it's less traditional, but actually easier to work with, quicker to work with. Agile credo, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And that's fine in many cases, but when it comes to say a flight control system, perfection is probably really good in that case. If I'm going to be on a life support system, I want it to be pretty darn perfect, not 98% good. So the more documentation in that regard, the more processes, the more gates, the more sign-off, the better it is as far as those critical life types of applications. Okay. So as far as test management support, HPE continued to build on the Quality Center platform. They also developed better collaboration with Agile and integration with third-party Agile tools such as Jira and Jenkins and other tools as well. Because honestly, for a while there, HP, being the big dog on the block, really had the attitude that we don't have to play with anybody else. We are the standard, we're the best, the biggest, and they are the biggest, and in many cases the best. But opening the doors to other third-party applications to work with was really kind of a tough move for HP to do. Finally, they realized tools such as Jira, tools such as Selenium, and others on the market were strong tools that filled a niche that Quality Center did not have and UFT did not have. So finally, they opened the doors and was allowing and developing tools to actually integrate the Agile tools into ALM, in the Quality Center. So that was a nice shift, but it really didn't go quite far enough. So we're all familiar with this graphic. Again, very cyclical environment Agile is, and with multiple sprints, quick sprints, as opposed to long, drawn-out waterfall process from end to end. Sprints are very quick. So let's take a look at DevOps. DevOps was interesting to really do a study on, simply because it's such a young process relative to the others. So it really started back in 2008 and 2009 with a gentleman by the name of Patrick Dubois, never got his name quite right. But he was a Belgian consultant, worked with organizations as he was both on the development side and on the operations side. So he was really privy to all the infighting and the silos and the communication gaps and the challenges in getting something delivered to market for the business when nobody wanted to take responsibility for failures. people just raise their hands off. I have no idea what just happened. So I had to stay up all night working on something, but I think it's your code. Well, no, it's your build. Well, no, I think it's your code. No, I think it's your environment. So he looked at that and gave a presentation back in 2008 that was one of the first really to detail these challenges and some possible solutions to them. Then in 2009, two Flickr employees by the name of John Osbald and Paul Hammond presented a talk called 10 plus deploys per day, DevOps cooperation at Flickr. So one of these gentlemen was leading the development side and one was leading the operations side. And they were just both sick of dealing with the siloed challenges. So they implemented some processes and some tools that were available at the time. And they mentioned some tools in this talk. There's better tools out today to support DevOps, but they worked what they had. And they present a very interesting, sometimes comical presentation of the challenges they had and the processes they put in place. And this is really seen, I mean, there are better DevOps talks out there as far as showing the more modern implementation of DevOps, but this is really known as the first talk at a convention related to DevOps challenges, or development challenges, and putting in DevOps processes into the environment. And this was even before DevOps was even a term. Okay, it wasn't even coined at that point. So I will put in a parental warning here. If you do choose to look at this this talk on YouTube, it is on YouTube. It's about 45 minutes long. I would recommend using headphones because one of these gentlemen, I forget which one it is, but he's kind of very loose with his adjectives. I could put it that way. Okay, so if you're easily offended, I would say don't watch it. Those around you could be offended. Use headphones just to avoid any kind of misunderstandings there. So just be forewarned. All right. So the definition, in short, DevOps exists to help the business win. So the focus isn't on whose fault it is that something broke. The focus is how do we get the business to win overall, because when business wins, everybody wins. Okay. The scope is broad but centered on IT, and really the most important thing is the culture of the organization. The culture is challenging. Most companies who are very old, very large companies, they're kind of tough to move towards DevOps because the culture is so ingrained in a very, very linear process. All right. I'll talk about that more in a little bit and give you an example of that. And then also automation not only helps, automation is really critical for strong DevOps. And what you'll see in ALM Octane, they really bring this to the forefront in Octane by actually connecting with Jenkins and being able to run those jobs and pipelines right from ALM Octane for the automation piece. So we'll take a look at that in a little more. So all in all, in June 2006, almost 2 months ago, ALM Octane was released, and it is the next generation of ALM. And it's interesting, it's good, that's strong to point out that it is a completely new platform. And that's important to understand because at this moment, there is no upgrade path from ALM.NET to ALM Octane as far as on a project level basis. And there may never be. Maybe some third-party company will figure something out, who knows, but the platforms are completely different. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later as well, as far as how you would implement ALM Octane in your organization if you're currently using ALM.NET. The other thing, there's native integration for open source DevOps tools such as Jenkins and Git, TeamCity, and some others that we'll mention as well. So those are embedded in ALM Octane. So again, just a visual just to show you the process of DevOps, very interrelated, very tightly. The two groups are tightly joined together. They're really just one group now, not just DevOps, but DevOps as far as an organization. So Brent, we have another poll, if you don't mind, sir.
We do, absolutely. So given the last few slides that Dean just went over and the quick little history lesson, appreciate that. We thought we'd do another quick poll saying, given your understanding of your organization's projects, what SDLCs are currently used? Would it be Waterfall, Agile, DevOps, a combination of the above, or just a giant mess? We just want to give everybody a little bit of time to take that. We'd greatly appreciate the feedback. Just going to give it a few more moments for everybody to participate. It looks like just about everyone has voted, so I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and share the results. So it looks like we have 7% using Waterfall, about 20% Agile, 0% DevOps, 61% a combination, and 12% are just a giant mess. So, Dean, any thoughts there before I pass it back
first
on?
of all, I feel sorry for those with a giant mess, but understand you're not alone. We see a lot of organizations that really are a giant mess. A lot of that comes from trying to move from one, like a waterfall, to an agile DevOps process, and it's not implemented well, and it can fall apart. Then you end up with a giant mess. So a combination of the above, that's what I would expect. A lot of organizations are moving to a shift left kind of process, agile and DevOps, but it's not organization wide. It's maybe take a pilot project and use agile or DevOps, whatever it happens to be, but it's not a one failed swoop. Honestly, it doesn't work that way. Some of you are purely agile, which is great, and some are still waterfall, a small percentage, very small percentage actually. So that poll was interesting. Thank you for participating. It's good information. Appreciate that. And you can see you're in good company no matter where you fall there, honestly. So for companies that are really known for the different processes, NASA, IBM, Raytheon, Google is known for utilizing waterfall, kind of entrenched in the waterfall process. And that makes sense. NASA, IBM, very, very large companies, been around a very long time. Raytheon's been around a very long time. And Google has too. But I'll give you an idea. This is not to stereotype, but I was recently at an organization, there's an over 100-year-old financial institution, and they are purely waterfall, trying to move. One project is trying agile methodologies, but not having very good headway. But when I was there, the dress code for men was a suit and tie, and not just sport coat, but a matching pants, jacket, as in a suit, shirt and tie. I have one suit. Different shirts, different ties. They saw one suit the whole time. Nobody said a word because I think I'm not the only one there who just has one suit. But I was there for 3
trips to the dry cleaners throughout the week.
Yeah. Yes, just before I started smelling bad, but it worked out fine. I was only there for a week, so thankfully. But those types of organizations with a lot of tradition, a lot of inbred culture like that, it's tough for them to move from this entrenched waterfall process. When you take a look at Agile, you have Spotify, eBay, Tesla, and again, Google, cutting-edge organizations. Google using both, and it's a good example of an organization that realizes that not one methodology is best for any organization. You have to choose the methodology based on the project you're working on. Okay. Amazon, Netflix, Facebook, Adobe, and I mentioned Flickr already. Those organizations are well known for strong implementation of DevOps processes and methodologies and tools. So again, cutting edge, younger organizations using DevOps. So as far as the basic difference, let's get started with the difference between Octane and ALM.NET. The basic difference is simply this, and this is kind of why I went through the history of the tool, because ALM.NET is built with waterfall in mind. We realized it was back in '95 that Test Director came out. That is the platform that really still drives Quality Center. It was all during the waterfall process. There really wasn't anything else. So they developed Test Director to work within the waterfall process. And it became the standard for lifecycle management tools. And even today, those tools are compared against ALM/Quality Center. It is extremely robust. It is massive in what you can do with it. Most organizations use a fraction of the capabilities simply because there's so much you can do with ALM Quality Center. But again, HP realized that the world of IT and the world of software development is moving on. And instead of trying to tweak ALM, the current ALM.NET, to better work with Agile. It does work with Agile. We have organizations who do work with ALM.NET for Agile projects, but they really need to start from the ground up. Build a new tool that has the shift left testing in mind, okay? And that's what ALM Octane is. Completely new GUI, numerous new features to support your Agile, DevOps, and Lean methodologies. It does support Waterfall as well, so we don't want to leave Waterfall, by the wayside. It does support Waterfall, okay, without a doubt. But it is really driven towards DevOps methodologies. And it's also important to note that ALM.NET and Octane can coexist, meaning that if you currently have ALM.NET in-house, you can actually use ALM Octane. You can get ALM Octane for free, the tool itself, and then share those licenses from .NET to Octane. The other thing right now is Octane is only available as a SaaS offering. Within the next month or two, HPE has stated that they will have an on-prem option as well. Okay, so if you're not into SaaS offering, your organization doesn't like having things out in the cloud, and on-premise installation should be available within the next couple months. At least that's what we understand. Okay. So this image also points out the difference between the integrations. So ALM.NET, it does integrate or interface really with Git and Jenkins, but it requires another tool in between to actually have the two tools communicate with each other. All right, not very robust, but it kind of serves the purpose. ALM Octane has those tools embedded in Octane. So we'll see in a minute in the pipelines module in Octane, where you can actually see all the pipelines in Jenkins, run them, view the results, and so on and so forth, right from within ALM Octane. Git is actually embedded into Octane, and it is the source control or version control tool that ALM Octane uses. So that's quite a difference, honestly. As far as automation tools, ALM Octane still does support HPE's automation tools. As you see down the bottom there, it also supports Selenium and actually any automation tools and processes that Jenkins can support, ALM Octane supports. And we'll talk about that shortly as well. So it's kind of tied into more third-party integrations for change control. Git Subversion is supported by Octane. CI/CD tools, Jenkins and TeamCity are supported. And like I just mentioned, the automation tools that are supported depend on the CI tool that's being utilized. Okay, so JUnit, Selenium, NUnit, and there are others, of course, that are supported by Jenkins and TeamCity. So what about the other agile management tools such as Jira, Rally, version 1? Those are connected to, they're not really integrated at all, but what you can do, say from Jira, is import data from Jira into ALM Octane. But right now there's no integration into Jira from Octane. Okay. So what's going to happen actually in the next 18 months or so, the idea for what's going to happen with ALM Octane is the features that are contained in HPE's Agile Manager will be integrated into ALM Octane. So if you have Agile Manager and ALM, all those features from Agile Manager will be integrated into Octane. Okay, so maybe that's why they're not really integrating into Jira and Rally, and those because ALM Octane is and will be even more stronger in the future, an Agile management tool that has all the features that Jira currently has. So that's the plan in the long run, 18 months from now. So when it comes to the modules, so physically the modules in Octane, there's a dashboard. It's essentially the control center that shows you graphs, as many as you want. You can build them out using widgets. There's pre-built and customizable widgets. And you can have a view into your holistic project. The backlog is manage and analyze the quality of a specific release. So backlog, you're going to create, excuse me, your stories, your tests, and other things we'll talk about viewed from the backlog perspective, and that's your release perspective, I should say. There's an application modules module. and it analyzes the quality of the product overall. So whether it's a release, specific test, or cycle, or regressions testing, or unit testing, or integration testing, all those pieces will be visible in the application modules. The pipelines I just recently mentioned, it's a graphical representation of the flow of your CI server jobs. So from here you can actually run the pipelines. They can include all the builds, all the automated tests associated with those jobs in the pipeline, view the results, track code changes, and actually you can actually then create defects from there as well. We'll take a closer look at that also. The defects module, not a whole lot changed there. We'll take a closer look at that as well, but it is also available. The defects, there's a defects module specifically for defects, but then from the backlog and applications module, you can access the defects right from there as well. So if you're used to ALM.NET, one thing you see missing here, a couple of things you see missing here in the modules, is the test plan module and the test labs module, two very, very heavily used modules in ALM.NET. The idea being is it's a different thought process around your tests. So instead of creating a test like you do in ALM.NET and then associating it with requirements or defects or whatever it happens to be, you create the test in Octane already based on that representation or that reference. So you build your test from a story, you build your test from a defect that was found, and it builds that reference right away. So you don't have a separate module for tests. Tests are available through all the different modules as in a tab, just to click it, and it references those tests related to the module that you're in. All right, so a little different concept, a little different idea as far as working with tests and test execution. We'll get into a little bit more detail coming up.
Hey Dean, real quick, before you go a little bit further, somebody submitted a question I thought was relevant based off of the slide before that one when you were talking about Agile Manager. The question was, are they planning to end of life Agile Manager then?
Good question. From all the conversations we've had, the answer is no. The same thing with ALM.NET. So if you're currently using ALM.NET and you have no interest in ALM Octane, you're not going to be forced to upgrade to ALM Octane. Same thing with Agile Manager. So both those tools still have many plans in the years to come for upgrades. There are new releases coming out all the time for both of those tools. And that's why they built this so that ALM.NET and ALM Octane can really coexist in the same organization, because they're not looking at replacing ALM.NET. Okay. If anything changes, we'll let you know. But that's the messaging that HPE is currently giving, and looking at the releases upcoming, it is certainly the case. So thanks for the question. Sure. So the life cycle is just like in any agile process. You're going to start with the backlog. It's actually on the left-hand side here, but when you build the backlog, what assets do I need to test release or the sprint? You're going to build stories, test. You're going to design themes, which is a product or area of a tab inside of Octane where you can build themes. So whatever you need to support that current sprint, you build in the backlog. You go to the pipeline, you can have all the jobs built in Jenkins for supporting that sprint, including all your automated tests. So you can run those if you have the rights to do it. Not anybody can just run these jobs from Octane. You have to have the authorization, right, user authorization to do that. But then there's also a manual test side. So you're creating at the same time the manual test from the stories, and execute those tests, submit defects, track the quality, the dashboard, and we'll take a look in a minute at the overall dashboard. But then also there's the backlogs module and the applications module has their own dashboard. We'll take a look at that in just a bit as well. But the GUI is very easy to navigate. It's much more flexible than ALM.NET, and so I think you'll appreciate the rebuild and the new GUI that ALM Octane has. So let's get into it. Let's take a look at the backlog. So this is where you would start in your process. Now again, there's themes and features, and there's levels of hierarchy. If you look, see those tabs, I know it's a little small, so I apologize for that, but you have themes, excuse me, and features and stories, and they're just a hierarchical level of detail, to support your stories and then your tests as well. So you have a tab for tests, so anywhere, again, in the backlog, you can access stories, you can access the tests related to that cycle. So the tests, just another tab. So these can be manual tests, they can be automated tests, unit tests, whatever you got, whatever you have to support this particular cycle. And on the right-hand side, there's some quick graphics to show you the history and things going on in that particular test. You can also, on the right-hand side, those colors are simply the history of the run of that particular test, whether it passed, failed, not completed, things like that. So you can actually drill down into the history of that test run anywhere in the test tab. So then, of course, you have the overview. As you're building your themes and features, stories, and tests, executing the test, whether automated or manual, you can see the results here. So these use a widgets concept. There are widgets that are pre-built for every module, but then you can customize those and you can build your own widgets. So whatever view you need for your effort, for your role in the organization on the project, you can build a backlog overview that supports, say, what you need to work on that day, what's outstanding on your bucket to work on for this particular cycle or this particular sprint. Creating manual tests, it's not much different from ALM.NET. However, the GUI has changed, the concepts are the same. In ALM.NET, if you're familiar with it, when you create steps, there's a name of the step, there's a description, and the expected result for every step. Well, that's not really practical, honestly, because not every step requires an expected value. So it's understood, and HP built this into Octane, that there could be several steps before you really need to put an expected value in. All right, so here you can add step, add step, add step, and then once you go through that process, it's expected now to add this validation step that the application will behave in a certain way. Something will appear, whatever that validation step is. You can build that in as a separate step in and of itself. Okay. There's also a concept of adding calls to steps as well that are standard steps that you can build into ALM Octane. From here, you can run the step or run the test, and you can actually view relations as well. So as you build these tests from the stories, it actually creates a relationship between those. And you can add additional relationships as well. Say this test supports a defect or tests a defect. So you can build that relation as well. And it's also a graphical representation. I don't have a screenshot, but it has a graphical representation of those relations with all the entities within Octane. The other way to create manual tests, and this is really a great new feature of Octane. If you're not familiar with gherkin language, it's a BDD language. In other words, a behavior development language. Okay. So it's actually used by Cucumber, which is an automation tool, but it actually supports a syntax, a structured syntax for building your manual tests. And as an automation engineer, it's kind of what I love to do, and I've gone in a lot of projects to do that. If I was given a manual test like this, it'd be much more simple for me to look at this and see the logic behind it and have it make sense, as opposed to a free-form manual test. So when you create a scenario, it automatically puts in kind of a keyword given, when, and then. So given something, when this occurs, then this is the result. You can also put conjunctions in there that end or to build out some logic. It's almost like pseudocode, really. Very nicely embedded into ALM Octane. The other difference between .NET and Octane are manual tests, whether they're the traditional form or gherkin tests, are actually saved as code, as files themselves. So you can actually interact with these outside of Octane using whatever an editor that you may prefer, and then pull them into ALM Octane. So that's kind of a side note as well. So, excuse me. So this is a look into the applications module. So on the left-hand side, you can see how the project is organized using hierarchical views, similar to folders in ALM.NET. Kind of the same idea. Break it down into its different components, and you can associate your tests and defects with those particular components of your application. So, excuse me. So these are, the other thing I want to point out here that's important is on the right-hand side, it uses a concept of tags for tests. So in ALM.NET, you have drop-downs, user-defined fields that you can select items from for your metric collecting and things like that. ALM Octane uses a concept of tags. So there's some pre-built tags for each module that really do make sense. They can certainly add your own. And you can actually select a tag that then filters your view. In this case, in the test, defects have the same thing. And it'll filter your view on what's actually being shown as far as the test in there, whether they're automated, unit test, manual test, or regression, whatever it happens to be. There's also a search option up there and towards the top on the bar. You can just search for any keywords, and any test that has that keyword in there, no matter where it is in the test, your view will be filtered for that as well. Okay, so again, it shows the history on the right-hand side. Very flexible to work with. I would say less cumbersome, honestly, than ALM.NET. More of a free-flow testing environment. You're not relegated to the testing module. The tests are available through modules in Octane. So when you execute manual tests, there is a runner, a manual runner, similar to what's in ALM.NET. The GUI is different, but the concept is the same, prompting for this particular step. Here's the expected values or the expected verification step. You can pass or fail it. From here, you can also create defects right from the execution, just like you can in ALM.NET, and it also pulls in all the information relevant for this test, the step that was running, the name of the execution, all that information gets pulled into that defect just as it does in ALM.NET. Now, one other thing important to mention here, for those who are using Sprinter, there is no plan, from our understanding, to integrate Sprinter into ALM Octane. We have some organizations that solely use Sprinter for manual testing. If you're not familiar with Sprinter, it's a tool in ALM.NET that allows you, HP coined the term called interactive testing. So it's going to give you a very robust tool for creating manual tests, executing manual tests. But it is not in Octane. I'm not honestly sure if it's on the list of items to implement into Octane. If it does, we'll let you know. But for now, there is no Sprinter type tool in Octane to run your manual tests or create manual tests for that matter. So what about automated tests? All right, so automated tests, again, are a totally different concept than ALM.NET. These are executed in the pipeline module in Octane. So what the pipeline module is, it's actually a live pull from Jenkins, from all the pipelines and jobs in Jenkins are visually represented in Octane. So if you have the rights to do it, the authorization to do it, you can actually select one of these pipelines, run the pipeline, and Octane will show you the status of the run as it's running, what job is running, what tests are running, pass and fail, states, and all that in there. So, and the overview of the pipeline will show you, in this case, a full CI cycle. It shows you the status, the current status, the assets that are behind it, the jobs that have run, what passed, what failed, the history of it. All that's within that visual component in the overview tab. So really a different concept. And those automated tests can be anything, again, supported by, in this case, Jenkins. So they can be lean FT, they can be Selenium tests, and ultimately they can be UFT tests as well. But you run them in relation to a build, to a pipeline in Jenkins, as opposed to running them from a test set in ALM.NET, which we do now. Quite a difference. So once you run your test, so say you're a QA person, someone just executed a pipeline, a build in for Jenkins in the pipeline module. So you want to look at the results. So you look through the results. There's some pass and fail conditions. If one of your tests fails, something that's relevant to you, you can click, select it, look at all the details on the right-hand side. If it's a failure that you want to submit as a defect, you can just create a defect right from here. Again, it actually includes all the details related to that test step that failed and that test that failed. So you don't ever have to, really, as a tester, you may not have access to Jenkins, but that's okay, because you never have to look into Jenkins for more detail. Anything that's in Jenkins is displayed here in ALM Octane. It is a full integration into Jenkins, or TeamCity and some others as well. So tracking the defect lifecycle. So again, it's not a whole lot different than ALM.NET. It looks and feels different, of course. It's a whole different GUI, but my point is, as far as features, it's you know, so much you can do with defects, I guess, right? So not a big change here. The biggest change, again, the same as test entities, is it's using the tag concept as opposed to user-defined fields and selecting items and things like that. Now those are available, I should say. Let me not say it's not no longer active or available, but if you click on a particular defect, there's all kinds of fields to fill out. You can make mandatory fields or non-mandatory fields, things like that. But then you can also add tags to further filter and sort and report on your defects. The dashboard is, yes.
I just wanted to ask you real quick, if you don't mind. I've got there's been some questions here, and I wanted to make sure we had time to get to some of them. So sure. I figured I'd throw one out to you really quickly.
Go for it.
Just a kind of a top level question. What on what OSs will Octane support?
My understanding right now it is just Windows. I could be mistaken, but
I do believe I saw in one of the briefing reports that it would be supported on Mac OS through web base only, though.
Okay, great, awesome. So you know more about that than I do in this case.
I'll take over from here, Dean. You go.
Yeah, you got it, man.
Take that nap.
So what we can do is, along with any unanswered questions, Brent, maybe we can actually send out some overview documentation on ALM Octane, including you know, environments and supports and things like that.
I think that's a great idea.
Okay, so we'll do that for sure. Just some general, so you don't have to go digging for it. We'll just send you what's really relevant, what makes sense, and you know, make sure all those generic questions are answered for sure. Okay.
Yep. Thanks, Dean.
Nope. Thank you. So again, the dashboard. There's dashboards available for other modules as well, specific modules, but there's an overall dashboard. Okay, in this case, it shows any graphs using a widget to show the burn down charts or run status by application modules. Anything you really need to see that's relevant to you, maybe as a manager, you just really need to see a holistic view of what that sprint is doing, what's left over in the bucket, who's performing, who isn't performing, right? All that can be collected as well. So any of that can be seen here in the Octane dashboard as its own module. All right. So in summary, ALM.NET was designed for Waterfall. It can be used for Agile projects. We have a lot of organizations using ALM.NET for Agile. It's just a matter of tweaking it a little bit. Instead of calling it releases and cycles, it's releases and sprints. And just organizing some of the folders differently, some of the other assets differently to support an Agile methodology. All right. There are new releases, as I mentioned before, scheduled for the foreseeable future. Integrations are available for open source DevOps-focused tools, just limited variety of them. But again, that requires a process in between the two tools to allow them to communicate. ALM Octane was designed with Agile DevOps in mind. It is the purpose. There are native integrations for third-party DevOps tools. It does support better collaboration for teams. You see the GUI is a little more flexible, easier to navigate. So it just supports that cohesive communication better across the teams. But again, I do want to reemphasize that ALM Octane does not leave Waterfall behind. It does support your Waterfall projects as well. And as I don't have a bullet here, but just again to reemphasize, the two tools can live together. So you can have some projects on Octane, some can stay on .NET. Maybe you want to select a pilot project to utilize ALM Octane and do kind of a lessons learned for other projects, and then slowly implement Octane into your environment, in your organization. But along those lines, Checkpoint Technologies can help with that. Okay, so if you're not sure if Octane is really good for your organization, if you're not sure how to vet the projects that would best work within ALM Octane, or you just need a kind of more in-depth analysis of Octane itself, feel free to contact us, and we can certainly help you along with that. And with that, if there's any more questions that we can answer now, that would be great.
Yeah, we've got a couple of minutes here to address a few questions. First one actually had a couple of people submit this, so curious on the answer. Will ALM Octane integrate with Performance Center like ALM.NET currently does?
So again, ALM Octane is a whole different platform. Performance Center is built on the ALM.NET platform, so it does not integrate into ALM Octane. And honestly, I don't know of any information or any plans down the road to create a Performance Center tool for Octane. That's one question we haven't asked, but that is a great question that we can submit to HPE and get some information on that for you. But for right now, it does not.
Yeah, I know that on the first plans were to just integrate with StormRunner currently, but nothing as of right now that I've seen for Performance Center. But we'll definitely research that and get back to the people that asked that. And then along the similar lines, will ALM Octane be integrated with Mobile Center?
Again, my understanding is there is a plan, excuse me, to do that, but it is not integrated as of this moment. We could try to find some dates to see when that's going to happen. Brent, you've been doing a lot of research as well. Maybe you have some more information.
Not on that one, no. But we certainly can get as much of that information when we submit the answer. So we'll get back to everybody on that for sure. Next question. Talked several times about the widgets on the dashboard. Are they for use in both public and private?
Yes, they are. When you create them, when you create them in your environment, you create them for yourself. So the question is, can you create them as a public view? I haven't seen that in there when creating widgets, that option, and honestly, I haven't tested that out. So we'll have to test that out to see if, when I create a widget, if it's available for somebody else in the project to use. Again, I just haven't checked that out, but that is another fantastic question, and we'll get that answer to you. So good.
Great. Let's see here. We've got about enough time for one more. And I know you've sort of answered this several times in several different ways, but just to be certainly clear, the question is, can we upgrade or convert our current version of ALM from version 12.5 to Octane?
So if you currently have ALM.NET 12.5, you can actually utilize ALM Octane in your organization, but the challenge is those entities in ALM.NET have been created on a whole different platform, whole different database structure, and it's just completely different environment. So there's, unlike being able to upgrade from one version of ALM.NET 11.5 to 12.5, there is no upgrade process to ALM Octane. And as far as HPE's perspective, there may never be, simply because they're both going to exist together. All right, so those projects that are currently in ALM.NET, they can continue through ALM.NET, and maybe if projects are going for years and things like that. But what you want to do is run projects in ALM Octane, different projects in Octane as opposed to ALM.NET. But unless if it's a small project, I've seen where you can certainly copy and paste requirements in this as a story or manual test to ALM Octane test, things like that. But if you have a lot of assets, that's a painful process to go through. But there is no connecting the two and clicking an upgrade button, unfortunately.
Gotcha. Thanks, Dean. Okay, well, we have quite a few more that we will definitely get to offline. So if you don't mind moving to the next slide, Dean. Just wanted to say before we close out today, I want to invite the audience to reach out to either one of us with any questions you have or anything your organization may need assistance with. We'll leave our contact information up there for just a few more minutes to allow anybody to take notes. Or if you have a question that comes up that you didn't get a chance to ask on the webinar, we'll certainly answer that for you. I do encourage everyone here to take the very short survey at the end of this webinar, letting us know how we did and whether you'd like us to contact you within the next few days, few weeks, or anything like that. So with that, on behalf of myself, Dean Carvin, and everyone here at Checkpoint Technologies, we hope you enjoyed the webinar and hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.